Hello. Welcome to another program of Clean and Green. This is part of the Clean and Green series. My name is Joe Wasserman. Today I'm interviewing Terri Eickel from the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network. Terri Eickel helped found the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network when she was in college, initially organizing the religious community in Connecticut around dirty fossil fuel plants called the Sooty Six. A career in opera and classical singing took her around the country, but she remained involved in nonprofit leadership roles, bringing vision and expertise as the executive director of the Heredity Neuropathy Foundation, where she developed and implemented their therapeutic research in accelerated discovery, triad research program. As the Director of Development for the Connecticut Cancer Foundation, Terri created and expanded several fundraisers to raise funds for Connecticut cancer patients. She also worked with the Avalonia Land Conservancy in southeastern Connecticut as their Director of Development, creating award-winning outreach programs for people with disabilities and fundraising to save over 1,000 open spaces during her time with the Land Trust. With the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network, Terri helped develop and lead the organization's Green Forum series, which focused on a variety of topics such as climate change, energy efficiency, toxic chemicals, pollinators, solar energy, and environmental justice. As of March 2023, Terri became the full-time executive director of the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network and is currently leading their initiatives on energy efficiency and food justice, as well as environmental advocacy on the state and national level. Terri, thank you for joining us today and for your critical work in protecting the environment.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Tell us about the work of Interreligious Eco-Justice Network.
Well, as you mentioned, we got started back in the 90s around the dirty fossil fuel plants that didn't meet modern emission standards. And basically, there were 5, and then they fired up another one, so there were 6. But these were oil and coal burning plants that were in New Haven and Bridgeport and Norwalk, Middletown. These were poor communities of color. They had much higher rates of asthma and respiratory disease than other cities. And they didn't meet modern emission standards because when the Clean Air Act was passed in 1970, these fossil fuel plants said, nuclear power is going to be all the rage. We're all going to transition to that. So please don't make us adhere to these clean air standards. And so they were grandfathered out. And at that time, in the 90s, it had been 30 years that these plants hadn't met modern emission standards. And I was actually in First Baptist Church of West Hartford as their soprano soloist when Pastor Tom Carr, who was the senior pastor at the time, said, some of us are concerned about our faith and we want to some of us are concerned about the environment and we want to talk about what our faith has to say about it. And I had just read in the Hartford Courant an article about these power plants. And I said, oh my goodness, this is what we should be doing. This is a moral, ethical, spiritual issue. And it's one that has theological basis for addressing. And, that's how we got started. We organized the religious community around these issues and around these power plants specifically. And it took 4 years. But after 4 years, the power plants were actually brought up to modern emission standards for sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide. And they've all currently been retired, except for the Bridgeport plant, which was transitioned to gas. But that was the start of IREJN. We then began working on energy efficiency for houses of worship and began expanding that way. So that was how we started.
Good. Who is currently part of your organization?
So we're an interfaith group. We work with, people of all different faith traditions. We work in concert with other environmental organizations like the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club, but we work with hundreds of houses of worship across the state. And a few years ago, we really decided to hone our focus on environmental issues that intersect with other areas of need or inequity. And so we really landed on energy issues, especially energy efficiency, and gardens and food justice. And the reason is because when you help folks become more energy efficient and help them access clean energy like solar, you reduce their energy costs get reduced, our greenhouse gases get reduced, our pollution emissions get reduced. They're better able to pay their basic living expenses. So there's a very practical, immediate application. And so we've helped houses of worship, the congregational buildings, become more energy efficient. We've helped them install solar, and we're also helping houses of worship reach out to their membership to do the same, to help them access the energy efficiency programs and help them with solar. And then on the garden side, we have a garden and green spaces program, and we have helped houses of worship install community vegetable gardens and pollinator gardens. And so that's helped houses of worship serve their communities with more access to fresh produce, and it helps them think about their sort of lawn space as habitat and part of the natural creation that the Creator loves. So those are two big focuses. Of course, we have other programs, like we have an awesome bird watching program called Faith Takes Flight, and we help houses of worship organize individual things like river cleanups and that sort of thing. So we have sort of separate things that we do individually, but those are our two big focuses along with environmental advocacy.
Good. How do you engage congregations and people of faith in your work?
There's a lot of outreach, and really, starting with the programs that I mentioned are really great because I've had more than one religious leader in the past year say, thank you so much for keeping, the poorest, the most vulnerable people in our community at the heart of this work. And that's so great because that's exactly why these programs appeal, because, every house of worship, every faith tradition talks about caring for people who are struggling, who are sick, who are oppressed, and they talk about caring for the planet. And so by finding these programs that align with that, it's really appealed to so many new faith communities. We've done so much more outreach into different urban and rural communities where they tend to not necessarily be as, the environmental programs might not be as accessible to them, And so Pastor Bailey, who is the pastor at Shiloh Baptist Church, amazing church in Hartford, he's one of our new board members, and he said to me recently, and I love this, he said, religious communities have a great way of decoding these programs for people, because when you are, working two jobs and maybe you're a single parent and, you're already, sort of stretched to your limit, he said, we can help them feel that these programs are for them. Some of these programs, the names and just the terminology that are used, which are, they're fine, but it sounds so sort of just clinical that people might now think, oh, that's not for me. And that, I think, is one of the benefits of working with houses of worship, is they have this ongoing trusted relationship with the people in their pews, and they can really help people feel like, oh, these programs are for me. They can help me, and they can also really connect to the dots to the other things. People want to live healthy lives. They want clean energy. They want clean air. They want clean water. They want clean food, clean land. Like, everybody wants that. That is universal. But whether or not they feel like they can access it and actually get it into their lives is another thing. And that's where houses of worship are really helpful.
Okay. What is the message that people of faith need to hear about the environment and the urgency of the need to protect it?
I think whenever I'm talking to any sort of decision maker or legislator or any person of faith, I say every faith tradition talks about caring for the planet. And the environment has unfortunately been politicized as something that is a liberal issue, but it's not. like I just said, there's nothing political about clean air or clean water or clean land. And so I think what people of faith need to understand is that this is something that they can fully embrace. It is within all of their sacred text and their own theological backgrounds. And time is critical. Climate change is real. Climate change does not care what any administration says or whether or not someone says it's a hoax. Climate change is real. It's happening. I mean, right now it's April 16th. It's going to be about 85 degrees today. We are seeing a very, very steady increase in temperature globally. Connecticut is being impacted. Obviously, we see an increase in extreme weather events, which we pay for, And so that's what I think people of faith need to understand is we have a moral imperative to address this, and it is here happening now. And so the time is urgent to do it. And we have the tools to do it. We actually do have the tools to do it. Solar energy is the cheapest way. Solar and wind over the last 5 years have become the cheapest way to produce energy. And that wasn't always true. Solar and wind were, more of an investment, yada, yada. But now they're actually cheaper. The cheapest way to produce energy is, as Bill McKibben says, point a piece of glass at the sun. So, we have the tools to do this. We just need to do it.
Very good. Yeah. And I think what people do notice is the erratic nature of the weather.
Oh,
we move from winter. Right. We move from winter to summer. It seems
exactly.
And we had very little, if any, spring.
Right.
That's not the normal cycle.
Right. And that's the thing is, when you're seeing climate change, you're seeing increases in extreme weather. And a few years ago, I want to say it was 2 or 3 years ago, there were almost back to back in January, 2 really severe rainstorms because it was 55 degrees and it was too warm to snow. And one storm, like on a Tuesday or something, caused major flooding in Norwich when a dam broke in Basra, and the city of Norwich, part of it, really, really flooded. And the news story was showing people being ferried out of like dominoes or something. They were on boats because they got trapped there when the dam broke. And that's the thing that also people need to understand is that climate change is also has all these tentacles of impact where you're looking at the infrastructure that's in place and is it going to be able to withstand? And in that particular piece, that was a privately owned little dam. And then 2 or 3 days later, there was another really big storm, and this time it impacted Mystic. And the images, and Mystic flooded. And the image that you saw on the news was this woman's BMW flooded up to the door handles, and so obviously that car is ruined. And it really made me think, like, climate change is going to impact everybody, but it's going to look different based on who you are, based on your zip code, and based on your economic income level. Because the woman who lost her car had car insurance, probably had it replaced, so sure she was impacted, but she was able to rebuild. People who lost their work hours that day because the business was flooded, how were they compensated for that? Did it impact their life going forward? Were they able to make their rent because their minimum wage job was suddenly, turned off for a week or 2 while the business dried out. Mm-hmm. And that's climate change is here for everyone, but it's going to look different for people.
Good. How do we build hope and unity in the face of the environmental protection rollbacks on the part of the Trump administration?
Yeah, I think, so one thing, if you want to feel, I would recommend, if you want to feel hope, read Bill McKibben's book, Here Comes the Sun. And he's actually going to be in West Hartford at the First Congregational Church of West Hartford on Monday, April 20th at 7 o'clock. So people can, I think, go to the First Congregational Church's website to find out how to register for it. Mm-hmm. But he is a very inspiring speaker. And I think the thing that we need to understand is that, I'm not going to lie, there are times when everyone feels very discouraged right now. Some of the things that are happening are mind-boggling, devastating. But we can still be making the difference. We can still be making our own choices to, again, support the expansion of solar on in every sector in our state. We can be planting native plants. We can be supporting, vegetation riparian buffers along the rivers that helps, filter water and reduce storm surges and stuff like that. So we can be making all of these personal choices, and we can really be advocating at our state level for good, strong environmental policy. We do not have to give up, and quite frankly, we really can't. And I think, as we see even the results of some of these elections that have happened, these special elections, people are really rejecting these this policy from the federal level. Like, they don't want it. They don't want to see our environment traded over for fossil fuel billionaires, so that the billionaires can make more money to stuff into their already stuffed pockets. We should have a livable climate. We should have clean air. We should have clean water. We deserve that. It's a right, and we should have it. So I think it's important for people to do what they can, as much as they can. Take breaks when you need to, because sometimes it is tough, but keep at it and keep showing up.
Yeah, in a way, I see it as a fight for survival.
Absolutely.
It's a fight for survival. Tell us about the climate change superfund that is being proposed for Connecticut.
So this is, I wrote that down the bill. It's HB 5156, and this bill would create a state-run climate fund run through the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection that is based on the assessment of damage from fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions, I believe, for the past 30 years. And I will say, just put a little plug in for the Sierra Club. They are the real leaders on this bill, and the organizer there, Juliana, has done tremendous work. And so for any more detail, people should look to them. But what this would do is create a fund for climate change, to help address climate change damages, really, to climate change. And the thing that's important to understand is that this is not going to impact our energy prices. Energy prices, as we've seen with the war in Iran, energy prices are set on a global market scale. So, a small state bill is not going to have that impact. What it does do is create some of the responsibility to pay for climate change on the fossil fuel industry. We are paying for it. We pay for it in our taxes. When the federal administration, through FEMA, or the state administration sends millions of dollars to help a town recover from, say, the floods in southwestern Connecticut, like 2 years ago, we pay for that in our taxes, and we should. We pay for increased homeowners insurance, when there are more climate risks. We pay for increased health insurance from climate risks. So people, regular taxpayer, voter people in America, we are paying for it. We pay for it in increased costs. So we're paying for every single way, so many different ways. The fossil fuel companies should have to pay too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that bill was passed out of committee, and I believe it's on the calendar for the House floor.
Yeah, people should definitely call their legislators and say, we want the climate superfund passed.
Right, and the message is make polluters pay. They should have to pay too.
Make polluters pay.
It shouldn't just be us.
Yep. Tell us about the environmental justice work that is happening in our urban areas.
So, there's a lot of work to expand electric vehicles, electric bikes, because of the impact that does to reduce pollution emissions. We're obviously doing a tremendous amount around energy efficiency. And IREGen was really, we really helped get funding for barrier remediation released this past year. And so this is a perfect example of terminology that sounds clinical, but is actually very applicable, and this is where groups like mine are really helpful. So barrier remediation basically means funding to remove barriers to weatherization, so anything in your house that might prevent a contractor from weatherizing your house. So it would be mold, lead, asbestos, anything where if you disturbed it like asbestos or you sealed it in with insulation like mold, your house would be unsafe. So what was happening previously is that the poorest, most vulnerable people in our state tend to live and housing with one or more of those barriers, a contractor would go in to do an energy efficiency, assessment to help them reduce their energy costs. And one of these things would be present and they would have to leave. And so one of the things IREGen really did was encourage and urge decision makers and the governor to release funding for that program so that people can now actually get those issues addressed and then also get their homes weatherized. And that's a real environmental justice issue that doesn't sound, sexy and shiny and that sort of thing, but it really helps people in those ways where I said it intersects with other areas of need. You're addressing health issues, you're addressing issues of comfort, you're addressing their energy costs. It's a multi-tiered thing. And if you think about just the impact of having a comfortable place to sleep, I remember talking to someone in Waterbury, and she said, for whatever reason, their electric heat was set up so that it was heating the upstairs. So the downstairs, where the living areas were cold in the winter, they were paying for electric heat too. The upstairs was hot, and they rented this place, so the landlord wasn't going to do anything. And so they were paying $1,000 a month in electric bills. It was boiling upstairs so no one could sleep. And then anytime they were downstairs in the living areas, which is most of the time, they were also uncomfortable. And you think about what's it like to go to work or go to school when you can't sleep at night. It's really hard to focus. And that in and of itself becomes a justice issue that we need to address. It's just kind of that basic. So there's a lot being done around energy efficiency, around solar, around clean vehicles and that sort of thing. And actually tree equity. The city of Hartford, I know, is specifically doing a tree giveaway for anyone who lives in areas of Hartford. The only one I think that doesn't qualify is the west end of Hartford because they have so many trees. But, Blue Hills and the north end of Hartford, if you want a tree, whether you are a business or a resident or a house of worship, you can get a free tree from the city of Hartford. So they should look at the City of Hartford's sustainability office for more information about that. It's free tree installed, planted for you and everything. It's great.
Good. Can you bring us up to date with legislation pertaining to the environment in Connecticut?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that because there's really a core one that I want to talk about, which is the solar bill. As I mentioned before, solar is the cheapest and easiest way to produce energy. As we've seen with the war in Iran, it is not subject to, wartime issues. As Bill McKibben said recently, the sun travels 93 million miles to get to your solar panels, and none of those miles are through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's really important that we expand all types of solar in this state. And there is a bill right now, and we're just really asking people to call their legislators and say, we want you to support, protect, and expand, especially residential solar. We should be encouraging this. We should not be doing anything that is going to restrict solar in any way. I've heard some stuff potentially about capping the amount of residential solar that can be approved in a year. This is not what we're looking for. We're looking for programs that are going to encourage solar, allow more people to adopt it. One thing that folks don't realize is that residential solar has a real impact on the rates we pay, because when it gets super hot in the summer, on a hottest day of the year or whatever, the utilities have to purchase more energy from power plants, and they start with the cheapest power plants first. And those are always the dirtiest plants. And so we wind up spending so much more on all of this extra energy that we have to buy because it's so hot. We got to stay cool, obviously, and it's also extremely dirty. When you add energy efficiency and solar into the mix, you reduce that peak demand when we're purchasing more of that solar significantly. And on the hottest day of last year, I think it was like July 24th or something like that, hottest day of the year. Don't quote me on that date, but the hottest day of the year, residential solar saved ratepayers over $8 million that one day by not having to purchase that dirty fossil fuel power. So that is why solar doesn't just help the people that have it, it also helps everybody. And so that's my message. I'm going to speak right to the camera. Call your legislator. Tell them that you want solar energy. You want to be able to have residential solar expanded, protected. We should be able to install it easily. It should be expanded for people who are low income. We should just be making sure that the residential solar programs that we have are protected and strong, especially in the face of what we're looking at energy-wise in this country. If you don't know your legislator, you can go to the Connecticut General Assembly website, which is cga.ct.gov. And if you go to representation, which is up sort of on the menu bar, and then click down to find your legislator, you'll be able to find your legislator just by your address. Call your legislator, tell them you want residential solar. It is a good, it's a great solution. It is the cleanest, cheapest energy solution we have.
Or residential solar, tell them you want residential solar without restrictions.
Without restrictions. We don't need restrictions, exactly.
Yeah.
It is something the state should be embracing.
Yeah, yeah. Do it soon. We only have 2 weeks left to the session.
Right. The session ends May 4th or 5th, I believe. So it's very soon. Once they get back into session next Monday, they will start voting on bills, and we want them to have something really strong for solar.
Do it today. If you can't do it today, do it tomorrow, but do it as soon as possible. Because the time is running out quickly on the session.
Right, and I will say, the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters does a great job with an environmental watch list. Mm-hmm. Their website is ctlcv.org, and they have updates on all of the bills you care about, including the Climate Superfund bill, the solar bills, riparian buffers, waste, any environmental issue. It's a great resource. I use it all the time. And our website is irejn.org, and we also have lots of information, especially for faith.
Say that again.
It is irejn.org.
And what does it stand for?
Interreligious Eco-Justice Network. We work with religious communities in Connecticut on environmental issues, climate change, toxic pollution, biodiversity loss, and that sort of thing.
How can people get involved with the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network? You mentioned going to the website, which would seem to be a first step, and we mentioned calling our legislators. Mm-hmm. What else?
Well, we've got a lot of programs that you can get involved with. We have ongoing events. We've got webinars that we do. We're doing more in-person things now, finally. Now that people are really back, we're looking forward. We're planning a Faith Takes Flight in Norfolk, Connecticut in May. So check out our events page. If you belong to a house of worship or a faith community, you can help get them involved into some of our programming. We will come out to your house of worship after service, and we could do a talk or hear what you guys want to, hear what they want to work on and that sort of thing, what really speaks to them. So we can really help create an environmental stewardship program for that religious community.
Okay, Terri, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. And thank you to the viewers for being concerned about our planet, about our community, and for acting. Take care.